Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the GioMoShow on 88.3 FM WXOU, Oakland University, Auburn Hills, Michigan, and all your wonderful station identification features. I am your host, GioMoShow, your sports media director here at WXOU, and the GioMoShow is your home for all Oakland University sports and beyond on 88.3 FM. And we are finally, I think it works this time, we are finally live on YouTube, on WXOU's YouTube channel. So I'm very excited. I get to watch myself as I do the show. Nothing better to look at than me doing my show, of course. So we got a great show for you guys today on FM as well as on YouTube, and you can find it later on YouTube and Spotify as well. That's where you can find the GioMoShow. But where can you find WXOU on social media? Let me tell you. You can find WXOU on our MAB award-winning social media platforms on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok under the name WXOU Radio and WXOU. And while you're at it, why don't you go give me a follow as well? You're already got the apps open, so just give me a little bit of a follow. I'm on Instagram on 2 accounts. I'm on Mosheri_Giovanni, that's my personal one. And you got the GioMoShow's Instagram account, baby. That's the GioMo Show, as you can see, spelled for you on the bottom of this wonderful YouTube live stream setup. So we got a great show for you guys today. As you know, the summer's here. There's no more new Oakland sports. Thus, I'm going to give you the old ones. We're going to go over some season reviews this summer, and then this week will be men's soccer. We're going to be taking a look at their season and how they did in 2021, coming off of their Horizon League Championship Tour in 2021. Or pardon me, 2022 is this past season. You guys know what I'm talking about here. And of course, we're going to take a look at the USPBL weekly update that I give you guys every week. Got the Hoppers hat rocking today because they do play the Unicorns today at 7 and 9. Need all the luck I could get for the Hoppers to get back in first place, or at least closer to it. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So we got a lot to get into today. And what else we got to get into? We got an interview with the one and only Teddy Rydquist. He's a sports media, or he's the sports information director, rather, of the Golden Grizzlies for men's soccer, for women's basketball, esports, and baseball. He's in charge of all the articles that you see, all the stats that are kept, the live stats that you see throughout the game. That's all Teddy, and we're talking to him at 6:30 on the GioMoShow. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and you can also find it on the GioMoShow YouTube channel quite soon. So let's finally get into some of the Oakland sports here. I've been dying to talk about the men's soccer team this whole week. But before we get started, let me tell you about Bart's Pizza. Bart Basilico reinvented his father's pizzeria business by putting it on wheels. I'm talking a pizza food truck, baby. Bart and his wife Lauren travel all around Metro Detroit, cooking up homemade pies made fresh to order in their 4-layered pizza oven on wheels. You can find them on their website at eatbartspizza.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Bart's Pizza. His last name is literally Basil, and if you need me to spell it out for you, Basilico is basil in English. So, you know he knows what he's doing with a last name like that. And while you're there, make sure to get a cannoli as well for a little sweet treat after your homemade pie. Bart's Pizza! It's too good! Alright, now let's actually get into some of the Oakland sports here on the GioMoShow. So we're taking a look at men's soccer here. So, to look back at this past season, 2022, let's take a step back further, 2021. This season was a monster one for the Golden Grizzlies as they finished as the #1 seed in the regular season with an overall record of 12-7-2 and a conference record of 8-1-1. This landed them the first seed in the Horizon League tournament, a first round bye, and I guess this is due more to their own merits rather than the first seeding, but they cruised their way to a Horizon League championship. You guys heard me mention it in the beginning. But 2021 men's soccer was a champion. In the second round in the semifinals, they faced UIC, who is no longer in the Horizon League, making the Horizon League a collection of an awkward 11 teams. They won that game 3-1. And then later they faced Cleveland State in the championship game and gave them the same score as they did UIC. 3-1 was the score for Oakland's championship game, and thus they hoist the Horizon League Championship trophy. And it gives them a little bit of a trip to the NCAA tournament of men's soccer, where they unfortunately lost at Northern Illinois University 1-2. So a great season for the Grizzlies in 2021. how do they follow that up in 2022? So in this past season, it was unfortunately a bit of a step down from the year before. Oakland finished the 4th seed in the Horizon League tournament with a 4-2-3 conference record and a 4-10-5 overall record. That landed them the 4th seed in the Horizon League tournament. The quarterfinals, they beat Robert Morris in penalty kicks. They tied the game 2-2, and then ended up winning it in penalty kicks 6-5. So it was just about as close as you could get for a soccer game for sure. And then in the semifinals, they faced a familiar foe, one that they faced in the Horizon League Championship tournament the year before, Cleveland State. But unfortunately, that game did not go their way. 2-4 was the final score as Cleveland State actually went on to be the champions themselves. But, so that's about the overall of it. Let me give you some of the details of it. We'll go game by game. We'll give you the rundown of the season for the Golden Grizzlies. Buckle up. So they started the season in about mid-August. That's usually when the summer sports start. And they started with 3 exhibition games. 2 at home, 1 away. The 2 home games were against Saginaw Valley State and Ohio State. And then they were on the road for Akron. Oakland only beat Saginaw Valley in those games and lost the other 2 to Ohio State and Akron. But that exhibition game for the Grizzlies would be the last time that they would win. That game was on August 13th. They wouldn't win another game, exhibition or not, until September 28th. It took a long time for them to get their first win. Not that they lost every game, they tied a couple of them, but it was just a really tough stretch for the Golden Grizzlies. In the beginning of the season. So in that stretch, it was 10 games that they went without winning. In that stretch, they were on the road for Creighton and Omaha, and then they faced DePaul and Butler at home. Then they faced Purdue Fort Wayne, Grand Canyon, U of M, and Bowling Green. And they were able to tie Purdue Fort Wayne and U of M. But like I was saying before, they didn't get a win for quite some time. But then they finally returned home for the start of Horizon League play, where they came into that weekend 0-6-2 was the record. And in that opening week of Horizon League play, they faced Robert Morris and Detroit Mercy and finally got some dubs on the record board. They beat both of them, both Robert Morris and Detroit Mercy, 2-1 and 1-0 respectively. And then they were back on the road to Cleveland State and Green Bay, where they unfortunately lost they lost against Cleveland State and then tied against Green Bay. Then for the week of homecoming, they traveled back home to face Wright State. The Raiders came into town and were served a 1-0 loss, giving Oakland their 3rd Horizon League win. So then a little bit of a bonus game here on homecoming week. They faced Western Michigan University, where it was a tough 3-0 loss to the Broncos. And if I remember right, this is about mid-October rather. This is where WXOU Live Sports was, a seedling to what it is now. And it was me, I remember our sports director, Harji Buttar, we were because it was a really rainy day, we were having a meeting of who was going to get who was going to talk to who when basketball finally had their media day. We were discussing that. We had like a little wheel to spin to see who got who, but at the time, we didn't know anything about what we were doing. We were just kind of following our passions rather. And me and Harj were in the parking garage in the staircase watching the game from afar, and just a tough scene for one of the last home games of Oakland men's soccer's season. So, just a little nugget for you guys on the history of Oakland, or of WXOU Live Sports, at least this new edition of it. So finally, let's get back to the schedule here. So, that following week after homecoming, it was, so after their loss to the Broncos, it was then Senior Day, where Oakland played IUPUI October 22nd. And we got another nugget of WXOU sports history. So that game against IUPUI is a very sunny game. The weather was still kind of holding up in that mid to late October season. And me and Harj Buttar, along with Ben Schrader, who was sitting next to us being our tech manager, we called our first mock game. Mock meaning we didn't broadcast it, and didn't broadcast it because we didn't know how. It was the first time we were using the equipment. Never called a game before in my life. We had the headset on, and we just kind of did it anyway just to get some practice with it. And it was a very fun game to call until the scores started coming from the Jaguars, from IUPUI. That game ended in a 2-4 loss. And I remember there was like any game, there was a few controversial plays there. But it was still our first broadcast. It was still our first talking to ourselves, I should say. It's not quite a broadcast if you're not casting it broadly. So Oakland loses on senior night, unfortunately, to the Jaguars 2-4. Then next week, they're on the road against Milwaukee for a scoreless tie. And then they come back home for the last Horizon League home game to face Northern Kentucky, where they got their frustrations out, and they won that game 4-1. So 4-10-5 is their overall record. 4-2-3 is their Horizon League record. Good for the 4th seed. Won against Robert Morris in the opening round, and then lost to Cleveland State in the semifinals of the Horizon League tournament. So, overall for this season for the Golden Grizzlies men's soccer team, it was unfortunately a bit of a step back. When you don't repeat as champions of the Horizon League or any championship, it's technically a step down. Still maintaining, let's say, top half of the Horizon League. Not all doom and gloom. I believe the Oakland coaching staff and the new recruits that they're going to be having in for this next season are going to be doing the Grizzlies a lot of good. So I believe in the comeback. The Grizzlies are going to be just fine. So, where does that leave us now? Where that leaves us is with a little bit of USPBL baseball. You know me, baby. I love my Hoppers. I'm very excited for them to face the Unicorns later today. Unfortunately, I'm not going, but I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on the game, as it's got some important... That game is a little bit of... It has some importance in terms of the USPBL standings, as it currently stands. The Unicorns are in first place, 7-4, and the Hoppers are just a game and a half behind at 6-6. So I'm excited for that game. But let's give you the rest of the week. What happened so far in the USPBL this past week? Well, we had the first matchup of the week that Thursday against, it was the Unicorns and the Beavers. Not a lot going on in this game. Unicorns win it 1-0. Going to some of the pitching for the Unicorns, Andrew Huffman pitched only 2.2 innings. They had everybody pitching in this game, and everyone pitched into the shutout against the Beavers. Get it pitched in. But Andrew Hoffman, with those 2.2 innings, he allowed only 2 hits and 5 strikeouts after facing 11 batters. So not a lot going on in this. The Unicorns, they got their first run in the first inning and then just cruised the rest of the way. There was a combined 14 hits in the game, though. So incredible job by both of the defenses to keep those hits from becoming runs. But you got the Unicorns winning 1-0 against the Beavers. Then that brings up the Saturday doubleheader. This weekend was the Hoppers and Mammoths in the doubleheader. This one I was actually able to attend. I missed only a few innings on the first game, but I'll give you the details of it. So, the game started. It was 0-0 after the first inning, but the Diamond Hoppers were the ones to start the scoring with a single run in the bottom of the second inning. Then we moved to the third one. Mammoths are held to 0, and then the Hoppers, they put on a 3-run inning against the Mammoths to go up 4-0 after 3. And then the Hoppers, after the Mammoths, they were able to come back a little bit. They got a single run in the 4th inning. But then the Hoppers, they send another 3 over. They send another 3 Hoppers through the plate. Is that the right way to say it? You guys know what I'm talking about. They scored 3 times, is what I'm trying to say. So the Hoppers, they scored 3 runs in the 5th inning to finish the game with a score of 7-1. So game 1 goes to the Hoppers. My Hoppers, baby. So then we get to the second game. I swear, every time whenever I watch USPBL baseball, they got the doubleheaders on, like, just about every Saturday. It always goes like this. You got a lot of offense in one game. You get the 7-1 score, whether it's for one team or both. You get a 9-6 game. You get something with a lot of offense. Next one's a bit of a defensive stinker in terms of points scored. But that's kind of how it played out for this one. So I'll give you the short story. Mammoths won it 4-0. Now to give you some more of the details, the Mammoths, they started off with the scoring with a single run in the first inning, and then scores were frozen all the way until the fifth inning, where they piled on another 3 to make that 4-0 game. Jeff Wilson was the pitcher for the Mammoths, and I was sitting in like the 6th row, on facing, or I should say closest to third base. And when you get that close and there wasn't a lot of people in front of me, I like to get loud. I like to chant. I like to heckle, let's say. So Jeff Wilson, he pitched for the Mammoths in 4.2 innings, and I didn't go too hard because the Mammoths had the lead at the time. But I would say my piece. I would give him the business a little bit. I remember he hit. There was a hopper that was hit by a pitch, and I would go, "That wasn't very nice, Jeff," like stuff like that. I love doing that. I think it's so fun to kind of shout, get yourself involved in the game a little bit, and if it's not bothering anybody. But I had to kind of keep it a little bit low, a little bit, as the Mammoths won it 4-0. So if you're gonna learn from me, my philosophy, and this kind of guarantees that you don't get kicked out of any games. So when you're chanting, when you're screaming at the players, when you're doing your thing, I keep it 1 part negative towards the opponent and 2 parts positive to my team. So what that means is I try to keep a 2-to-1 ratio. My hand's over here in the camera. It's 2 portions of positive hoppers and then 1 part of negative Mammoths. You don't get kicked out, you don't swear or nothing, and you're fine. So that way you can kind of keep the fun rolling. But that's how the game went, unfortunately. So the Hoppers split the doubleheader against the Mammoths on Saturday, bringing us to the Sunday game. It was a rematch of the Unicorns and Beavers. And this one, the Beavers got their revenge. They were able to shut out the Unicorns and make it with the final score 3-0. Nothing too crazy in this game. It was the Beavers. They scored a single. They didn't have an inning with more than 1 run. They scored a single one in the 3rd, in the 6th, and the 7th to give them that 3-0 win. Looking at some of the batters for the Beavers, Ben Wilcoxon, the shortstop for the Beavers, went 4 for 4 with 2 runs recorded in that game. And I know I haven't shouted out a lot of the batters, but you bat 1,000, you get on the show. So well done to Ben Wilcoxon. He was responsible for 2 of the runs. J.D. Stubbs went 1 for 3 with a single run to give it that 3rd run for the Beavers. And then Jake Armstrong pitched 4 innings for the Beavers, only allowing a single hit, walked 1 batter, and struck out 3 after facing 14 batters in that game. So now that brings us to, what was it, yesterday? Yesterday, Wednesday the 21st, one of the non-public games was played, and it was the Beavers and the Woolly Mammoths. So I think that still counts as week 5. I think we're in week 5 of the USPBL season. I think the new week starts on Thursday. So that's the assumption I'm going on. So still week 5. The private game, I guess you could say, was between the Beavers and the Mammoths. And this one was a battle. Sometimes it's the most exciting games are the ones that aren't shown to the public, unfortunately. But you gotta kind of dig through the stat sheet to figure out what the heck happened. So it started off with the Beavers. There was no scoring in the first, but the second is when the scoring started. 2 runs by the Beavers, and then followed up by 2 runs by the Mammoths in the 3rd inning. So already two 2-run innings, and you got a tie game going into the 4th, which ended up going into the 6th, scoreless. So you got a single run by the Mammoths in the bottom of the 6th inning to take a 3-2 lead. And then it was the Beavers to tie it in the 7th, 3-3. They tack on another one, 3-4, Beavers lead, in the top of the 8th. But then the Mammoths, they said no more. They said you get 3 runs in the bottom of the 8th to give the Mammoths the lead and to finish the game with the final score of 6-4 Mammoths win it. So that wraps it up for this week of the USPBL. For those of you joining on YouTube, thank you very much for watching. I hope the format doesn't look a little too primitive, let's say, too basic. But hope you guys are enjoying on YouTube. I'm sure enjoying it. It makes me feel like I got company in here. See myself at the camera, but overall for the USPBL, Unicorns are 7-4 and at the top of the league. Diamond Hoppers are a game and a half behind them, 6-6. Westside Woolly Mammoths are 7-8, and then the Beavers are 6-8. They're a half game behind the Mammoths in the West division, I guess. USPBL, even though there is 4 teams, they split it into divisions. Hoppers and Unicorns are on the East, and then Mammoths and Beavers are in the West. Which I know for some of you, like, and I only say this because people have asked me and they kind of didn't understand it right away. When I describe, like, oh yeah, Jimmy John's Field, the baseball thing, I cover that. They're like, isn't it just the 4? Like, don't they play anybody else? I go, no, they just play the 4. They just play amongst themselves. They play against the other 3 teams in the league, basically. So it's like, oh, well, what does that mean for the playoffs? Well, it just means that the seeds are just drawn that way, and you do a quick 2-round tournament. So, I mean, it's nothing crazy. Nothing crazy. But tonight, 7 o'clock, USPBL, Jimmy John's Field has the Hoppers against the Unicorns. And like I said before in the beginning of the show, I'm excited for this. If the Hoppers win, they get within half a game of the Unicorns, back in one step closer to being back in first place where they belong, and there's where they started with in the beginning of the season. The Hoppers, they started 3-0. And we're top of the league. First time they started 3-0 since 2017. And, it was looking good. I called it worst to first before the season started. You can check that out on Instagram at Moshe, or I should lean this way for the video, at Mosheri Giovanni. You can check it out. I got my Hoppers hype video, my Hoppers season prediction going worst to first. So if they can win this game against the Unicorns, then they're one step closer to getting that. So that is going to bring us to a break. That's going to end my personal segment here, and that's going to bring up our fantastic interview with the one and only Teddy Radquist. Now, to give you guys a little bit of a preview, if you missed the intro of the show where I talked about this interview, Teddy Radquist is the Sports Information Director at Oakland University for the Golden Grizzlies. He is in charge of men's soccer, he's in charge of baseball, esports, and women's basketball. In charge meaning all the stats, all the articles, all the player bios, all that goes through him. He's got to make all of that. He's got to make sure all that is running smoothly. So he's got a lot of responsibility, and I've worked with him a lot. And we at WXOU have worked with him a lot. He's been a great help to us, making sure that we're scheduled and we got our press passes, especially when we went to Eastern and Central Michigan for baseball. Let's call those away games. He was very helpful to us. So, I was dying to have him on the show. I want to know what what that job kind of entails, and, his responsibilities and his thoughts on the seasons that he covers. We covered men's soccer. We're going to touch on that a little bit in that interview. But, esports, women's basketball, the other one I'm missing, I drew a blank. But, I like to learn what they do. Especially because I work with them so close. You see him. I'm stalling right now because the video's loading. If you guys couldn't tell, he's the one. He's got his computer up. Every play in baseball, he's got to record it. Who did what? That's what appears on live stats. If you are on GoldenGrizzlies.com and you when a game's going on, it gives you the live stats. My hand's got to go around the mic. It gives you the live stats. He's got to input all of those, so it kind of gives you, some background, some behind-the-scenes action on what the Golden Grizzlies do. And I'm still stalling to get this thing up and running for you guys, because I can't wait to show you guys. I thought it was a great interview. Recorded it a couple weeks ago, and I have just been itching to show you guys what it's all about at Golden Grizzlies Athletics. So, we got it, and coming up is the one and only Teddy Radquist of the Golden Grizzlies.
eventually.